Okay, this is massive news and could change the entire landscape of American policing. A man was murdered back in 2016 over $6.45 in unpaid toll fees. From this one case, the Supreme Court just made a unanimous ruling which will make it way easier to bring excessive force claims against cops. To keep this video simple, concise, and succinct, the ruling centers around three legal considerations. The Fourth Amendment, the moment of threat doctrine, which is the precise moment the officer feels threatened, and something called the totality of circumstances, including events leading up to the force. In May of 2025, the U.S. Supreme Court made a landmark decision in Barnes v. Felix, which is a case that could reshape how we hold police officers accountable for excessive force. This unanimous 9-0 ruling rejected a narrow legal doctrine and expanded the scope for lawsuits against law enforcement, which potentially affects cases nationwide. The case stems from a tragic 2016 traffic stop in Houston, Texas, where a young black man, Ashton Barnes, was fatally shot by Harris County Constable Roberto Felix Jr. Now, let's get into the details of the case, the Supreme Court decision, and what it means for the future of policing and civil rights. The story begins on April 28, 2016, on the Sam Houston Tollway in Houston, Texas. Ashton Barnes, a 24-year-old black man, was driving a rented silver Toyota Corolla to pick up his girlfriend's daughter from daycare. Unbeknownst to him, the car's license plate was flagged for $6.45 in unpaid tolls from a previous renter. Around 2:45 p.m., Harris County Constable Roberto Felix Jr. received a radio alert about the vehicle and initiated a traffic stop. After Barnes pulled over, Felix approached the car and asked Barnes for his driver's license and proof of insurance. Barnes, who didn't have the documents on hand, mentioned they might be in the trunk. Dashcam footage shows Felix claiming to smell marijuana, though no drugs were found, and ordering Barnes to pop the trunk and exit the vehicle. Barnes opened the driver's side door but restarted the car and began to move forward. Felix drew his gun, stepped onto the car's door sill, and fired 2 shots into the vehicle, killing Barnes. The entire sequence from the car moving to stopping lasted about 5 seconds, with Felix firing within 2 seconds of stepping onto the moving car. Barnes' mother, Janice Hughes Barnes, filed a civil rights lawsuit under 42 U.S.C. 1983, alleging that Felix violated her son's Fourth Amendment rights by using excessive force. The Houston Police Department, of course, investigated themselves and found that they did nothing wrong. And a grand jury declined to criminally charge Officer Felix. But that didn't stop the civil case from becoming a battleground over how courts should evaluate police use of force. At the heart of Barnes v. Felix was a crucial question. When evaluating excessive force claims under the Fourth Amendment, should courts focus only on the precise moment an officer feels threatened, the so-called moment of threat doctrine, or should they consider the totality of the circumstances, including events leading up to the use of force? The Fourth Amendment protects against unreasonable searches and seizures, and the Supreme Court has long held that excessive force claims should be judged by whether an officer's actions were, quote, objectively reasonable based on all relevant circumstances. This standard was established in cases like Graham v. Connor in 1989 and Tennessee v. Garner in 1985. But some federal circuit courts, including the Fifth Circuit, which covers Texas, adopted the narrower moment of threat doctrine. This rule limits analysis to the exact moment force is used, ignoring prior actions by the officer or the suspect. In Barnes' case, the district court and the Fifth Circuit applied the moment of threat doctrine, focusing only on the 2 seconds when Felix was on the door sill of the moving car. They ruled that Felix reasonably believed his life was in danger, granting him summary judgment and dismissing the lawsuit. Notably, Fifth Circuit Judge Patrick Higginbotham, while upholding the ruling, criticized the doctrine and urged the Supreme Court to intervene, stating, quote, "A routine traffic stop has again ended in the death of an unarmed black man." Barnes' legal team argued that the moment of threat doctrine distorts reality by ignoring Felix's actions, like drawing his gun and jumping onto a moving car, which escalated the situation. They pushed for the broader totality of circumstances standard, which 8 other circuit courts, including the 1st, 3rd, 6th, 7th, 9th, 10th, and the 11th, and DC, already use. The Supreme Court granted certiorari, which is a higher court review, on October 4th, 2024, to resolve the circuit split over the moment of threat doctrine. Oral arguments were heard on January 22nd, 2025, and Barnes was represented by attorneys Catherine Booth Wellington and Nathaniel Zelensky. What's really interesting here is that during the arguments, justices across the ideological spectrum expressed skepticism about the moment of threat doctrine. Justice Neil Gorsuch remarked, quote, "Everybody agrees it's wrong," suggesting a consensus that the doctrine was too restrictive. Justice Elena Kagan emphasized that courts cannot assess, quote, "the totality of circumstances" if they wear chronological blinders. Even Justice Brett Kavanaugh, who later wrote a concurring opinion highlighting the dangers of traffic stops for officers, questioned the doctrine's narrowness. Barnes' attorneys argued that Felix's actions, like jumping onto the car, created the danger he then used to justify deadly force. Felix's team, supported by states like Texas and Alabama, defended the moment of threat doctrine, warning that broader scrutiny could discourage proactive policing and strain police budgets. Amicus briefs from groups like the Cato Institute and Color of Change supported Barnes, highlighting the doctrine's impact on minority communities and public trust in law enforcement. On May 15th, 2025, the Supreme Court issued a unanimous 9-0 decision written by Justice Elena Kagan, rejecting the Fifth Circuit's moment of threat doctrine as, quote, "improperly narrowing Fourth Amendment analysis." The court reaffirmed that excessive force claims must be evaluated under the totality of the circumstances, considering all relevant events leading up to the use of force. Kagan wrote, quote, "The court cannot review the totality of circumstances if it has to put on chronological blinders." The court vacated the Fifth Circuit's ruling and remanded the case for further review under the correct standard. But it declined to rule on whether Felix's actions, like jumping onto the car, constituted excessive force, leaving that for lower courts to decide. On the bad side of this ruling, Justice Brett Kavanaugh, joined by Justices Thomas, Alito, and Barrett, wrote a concurring opinion cautioning that traffic stops are, quote, "highly dangerous for officers," and that a driver's evasion could suggest a more serious crime. Kavanaugh urged courts to consider these risks, but agreed with the majority's rejection of the narrow doctrine. Now, the Barnes versus Felix decision has far-reaching implications. By standardizing the totality of circumstances approach nationwide, it ensures courts consider officers' actions that may escalate encounters, potentially making it easier for plaintiffs to bring excessive force claims to the courts. And this really could lead to greater accountability, especially in cases involving minor offenses like unpaid tolls. But the ruling doesn't guarantee a win for the Barnes family. Felix may still invoke qualified immunity, which protects officers unless their actions violate clearly established law. And lower courts will now reassess whether Felix's conduct was reasonable considering the full context of the stop. And this decision comes amid ongoing debates about police reform, particularly after high-profile cases like George Floyd's killing. Advocates like Color of Change argue it's a step toward addressing systemic issues, especially in minority communities disproportionately affected by police violence. But critics, including law enforcement groups, worried that it could deter officers from acting decisively, citing staffing shortages and public safety concerns. From a legal standpoint, you got to admit that Barnes versus Felix is a pivotal moment in the fight for police accountability. By rejecting this moment of threat doctrine, the Supreme Court has opened wide the door for a more holistic review of police actions, giving families like Janice Hughes Barnes a chance to seek justice. And as this case returns to the lower courts, its outcome could set a precedent for how we balance officer safety with the rights of Americans. So just to summarize, the Barnes versus Felix ruling eliminates the moment of threat doctrine, requiring courts to evaluate police excessive force claims under the totality of the circumstances. On the practical scale, this means broader scrutiny. Courts must now consider all events leading up to an officer's use of force, not just the split second when force was used. This includes officers' actions that may escalate a situation like drawing a weapon or engaging recklessly. Number two, this makes claims easier. Plaintiffs, like victims of police violence, have a better chance to argue excessive force in court, as the full context can now be examined. And it's really ridiculous that the courts were limited to the mere moment of threat. Number three, it sets a uniform standard. The ruling resolves a circuit split, ensuring all federal courts use the same totality standard. And this creates consistency nationwide. But this is no guarantee that officers won't claim qualified immunity, and courts will decide if actions were reasonable. And the ruling doesn't directly hold officers liable, but sets a broader framework for accountability. So yeah, this could lead to more successful lawsuits against police, especially in cases involving disappropriate force. But again, the outcomes depend on lower court rulings. So leave your thoughts about this for the world and the global thought police in the comment section below. If you like these videos, maybe you'll like some of my others. Check out my most popular playlist. I'm sure there's some videos on there that you haven't seen yet. Like this video, share this video with everybody you know. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell notification icon. If you want to support the channel further, the links are in the description. Grab a shirt, become a channel member, but more importantly, understand that your rights don't end where officer fears begin. Take care.